there is a trajectory here within the American president's mind that eventually will bring him round to the right side of the argument over Ukraine. But he's really, so far, not proven that's the case. So, you know, he's definitely the Prime Minister. He said that this was worth it. I think he's still got to prove it, particularly to those on his side of the party.
We can hear the bagpipes, and now we can see Donald Trump himself. The four of them, in fact, Donald and Melania Trump, and of course Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria there, standing at the steps of this rather resplendent country retreat here at Chequers. Well, there we go. Donald Trump's now left the building, ready to jump back in that military helicopter. And you can see, of course, the photographers, the media handlers, the security kind of scrambling around in his wake. It really is worth pausing to say, you know, in America, so many things are kind of supersized, and it really comes to that when we talk about the entourage of the president as well. Everything seems so much bigger than we're used to covering UK politics here. It's been enjoyable, I think is fair to say, 2-day state visit for the president as he departs now. He will have seen it as a big success. Keir Starmer too, they got the headlines that they wanted on things such as that tech investment into the United Kingdom, and they got through the news conference without a serious blow-up as well. Both men really on their best behaviour, determined not to embarrass the other. And there's Donald Trump stepping out of his car, short wave to the camera, a man who always has an awareness of exactly where the TV cameras are pointing. But it is worth saying too that despite the pomp and the pageantry, despite the enormous amount of effort that was put into making sure this man was happy, you have to take a step back and just think about how and where the UK has used its leverage and to what extent it's been successful. Certainly on Gaza, there's been absolutely no shift to position at all. The two men remain as far apart as ever. On Ukraine and with President Putin, yes, there were strong words about being let down by the Russian president, but again, no clear policy shift. And on the trade deal as well, despite the huge amount of investment that we saw that is absolutely welcome, no material shift on that trade deal and the tariffs imposed from the United States either. Donald Trump there getting back on the helicopter, leaving Chequers for Stansted Airport. Well, as we await the departure shots, we're joined, as always, from Dominic Waghorn, an international affairs editor, and I'm pleased to say as well, I think
Yes.
Mark Austin is here. Welcome,
Hello.
Mark.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
It's all go here.
Well, it's all gone.
You've just missed it.
It's all gone.
He's
hasn't
just
it?
left.
Yeah.
What did you make of it all?
Well, I was just asked by some American network correspondents, what will Keir Starmer be thinking tonight? And I said, I think he'll be breathing a huge sigh of relief, because there are so many things that could have gone wrong today that in fact didn't really. I mean, I've never seen Donald Trump so well behaved in a so restrained in a news conference. He normally, I mean, there are a couple of times when he did. I mean, on energy, I thought it was a bit of a side swipe. On immigration, when he talked about even if you have to use the army or the military, you've got to remove them. I think Starmer sort of raised an eyebrow at that. But on the kind of big issues, on the Gaza, I thought it was very interesting the way Starmer phrased it. He said the recognition of a Palestinian state is all in the context of a comprehensive peace plan for Gaza. Absolutely no suggestion what that comprehensive peace plan is really going to look like.
And on that, I just thought it was so interesting. They're saying, oh yeah, we really agree. We agree on the need for peace. Well, yeah, of course you agree on the need for peace. The gaping disagreement is over how you get to that peace, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would have said, judging from that they had a disagreement on Gaza, that Donald Trump is foursquare behind Benjamin Netanyahu. And when asked about it, he just kept going back to October the 7th, which he does, and which, of course, is a completely valid point. And, you know, then on Ukraine, it was interesting. He said, Putin let me down.
Yeah.
And then he kind of suggested it was up to the Europeans to put the pressure on Putin by not buying his oil. So the price of oil goes down. And he said, Putin will drop out, he said, if the price of oil comes down. So that was interesting. It didn't sound to me like Donald Trump is going to go back to Washington and stick punitive secondary sanctions on the countries.
Absolutely not.
We can hear the helicopter getting ever noisier, which means that departure is pretty imminent. Donald Trump leaving Chequers for Stansted Airport. And yeah, as Mark was saying there, it does feel that there were big wins on the diplomacy, on the pictures, on the pageantry, and look as well. Let's be real on the economic side, on the deals that were struck and the investment in the UK. But on the international area, there didn't seem to be any shift at all.
But I think the reality is on a state visit where it's all about royalty, it's all about the pageantry. They're not real. I mean, how long do they have together? I didn't hear that. Was it an hour or so?
They were going to have 15 minutes together, one-to-one. Yeah. They said, I think his official said it actually was double that, and then in the press conference, he said it was an hour. Yeah. So who knows?
But listen, this is not a summit meeting about Gaza. This is not a summit meeting about Ukraine. This is a state visit where they will have sat down, probably on their own, and gone through a host of subjects quite quickly. And then they even probably agreed beforehand, or their people will have agreed beforehand, the positions that they were going to take in the press conference, I imagine.
Yeah, I think, and that was obviously all the tech deal stuff that was pre-arranged, pre-negotiated, and something they could sort of reveal during this visit. And it's interesting, he could have really reacted to the Palestine question, and I think the fact that he didn't showed that he wasn't in the mood to be difficult. He was in a good mood and he wanted to behave.
It's getting very noisy here, as you can probably hear, to be fair as well, with that helicopter blades chucking through the air. Everyone's kind of all waiting and watching that takeoff happening.
So he's heading off to
Stansted, yes.
Air Force One and out.
Yeah, that's
so
it, all over.
An incredibly short state visit, but one during which I've never seen Donald Trump smiling so consistently.
See, this is it as well, though, because, and I totally know what you're meaning about look, all these. It's not a summit. All the stuff really worked out before, but they have really rolled the carpet out here. You know, they pulled out all the stops, and it's not just from the goodness of their heart. They want something in return as well, right? It's all kind of transactional, isn't it? So, do you think there will be a little bit of disappointment that he obviously just kind of shut down some of those?
I think overall, I think Mark's right. There will be a sense of just relief. You know, he survived this press conference. It could have gone a number of ways, and as Mark was saying, though, you'd expect them not to end up rowing, obviously in public. You'd expect Donald Trump to take the win and to be as gracious as he was, arguably, particularly in that speech last night, but also to be to be compliant and behave well during the press conference. But he's an unpredictable president who is easily riled, and the wrong question could have got a reaction and could have taken him down a kind of rabbit hole that could have been very difficult. So I think for Keir Starmer, there's relief and there's a sense that he's got through this. But I think, we will now, the Sunday papers will dissect this, won't they? And your guest next week will dissect this and look into this and go, what actually did Britain get in return? Didn't get any movement on Gaza, a matter that really matters a huge amount to Keir's supporters. No shift on Ukraine, really. And over the trade issue, over tariffs, no concessions either. So, he got a big tech deal, but what else?
I mean, one of the American correspondents says, this recognition of Palestine, where's the pressure coming from? Well, I said, well, it's coming from within Keir Starmer's party, mainly. But the key on that, I think, is that various European countries, tell me if I'm wrong, are going to announce this before the UN General Assembly.
Yeah, the plan was that France, Britain and Saudi Arabia would do so on Monday, and other countries as well. And then it looked like the French were going to jump the gun. So it's possible Britain will do it as soon as Saturday. And I think there was some speculation that if the wheels had come off during this press conference, then the government, number 10, would have wanted to sort of seize control back again of the news agenda, get a headline out there that could eclipse whatever happened here, the fallout from this visit, and possibly announce the recognition of Palestine earlier than expected. I think we're probably back to a schedule that's either Sunday or Monday. And, for this president, this was potentially a tripwire that he could have exploded on but chose not to.
Yeah. And Donald Trump would be completely satisfied, I would imagine. We were talking about Starmer breathing a huge sigh of relief, but Trump, I mean, I've never seen him so restrained. He's normally just accepts any invite to talk about the subjects that he wants to talk about. He clearly didn't want to embarrass Keir Starmer.
We were saying last night, Mark Stone, who's who was a more avid Trump watcher than any of us, that he's seen emotions from Trump that we've not seen. And as you say, you rarely see him smile, and he was smiling as he went round that collection of artefacts at Windsor Castle.
Yeah.
He was clearly very moved by going to the Queen's grave in St George's Chapel, and in that speech, he was more gracious than we've seen him be for I think possibly throughout his presidency, either for both terms. He's been very controlled, and he didn't go off the script in that speech and didn't really veer off into any potentially troublesome areas in the press conference. Clearly moved and very, pleased with the reception he's had here, and you can go back now with these pictures, and for him it's all about the pictures. It's all about the imagery, isn't it, that he knows makes him look very special in the eyes of Americans and his voters back home as well.
Absolutely. Dominic, thank you very much. I'm just looking at the time, and it is 5 o'clock. Good evening from Chequers, the Prime Minister's country estate, where Donald Trump's historic second visit has now drawn to a close. Tonight, Sir Keir Starmer will, as we've been saying, be breathing a huge sigh of relief. The potentially problematic news conference between the two leaders ended without controversy, with the American president on unusually good behaviour. The only publicised disagreement was on Gaza. On other issues like free speech and Jeffrey Epstein, Mr. Trump just, he just batted the questions away, including one from our own Beth Rigby. As you can see, or as you could see, the president is on his way here to Stansted Airport, where he will get on board Air Force One and depart for Washington. A very short state visit. He arrived late on Tuesday night. In a moment, we will get into what was announced and what was seemingly a successful visit for both Mr. Trump and Sir Keir Starmer. But first, let's just have a listen to that disagreement on the UK choosing to recognise Palestine as a state.
Well, simply, I want the hostages released now, right now, not 1, 2, we'll give you 3 more tomorrow. And, like it's been, but we're the ones that got all the hostages released. We got many, they came, many came to the Oval Office, and I've heard stories like I've never thought even possible. There was no humanity, no anything. I said to them, I said, was there any warmth shown during this stay? Like they offered you a little extra meal, they gave you a little smile, and they said, don't worry, you'll be okay. And every one of them said, not even a little bit. Amazing, you know, to think that during this stay, long stay in some cases. We had a man the other day, 451 days he was there. I always ask that question. And was there any warmth shown? Just a little word of, you know, encouragement. And the answer is every time, absolutely not. I'm shocked to hear it, because in the worst cases, there's always somebody that comes through. We have to remember October 7th, one of the worst, most violent days in the history of the world. Not just there, the history of the world. And I got to see the tapes, and I wish I didn't see them, actually. But I got to see them. And I want an end. I want the hostages released. And I think it's going to be okay. But it has been a brutal period of time. But this has been going on for a long time. This is not something that's over the last year, 2 years. But this has been for decades and decades. But we want it to end. We have to have the hostages back immediately. That's what the people of Israel want. They want them back. And we want the fighting to stop. And it's going to stop. But a lot of bad things. You know, Hamas said that they're going to put the hostages up as bait. They're going to put the hostages in front of any attack. And that's pretty brutal. We haven't heard that one in a long time. So we have to remember that. So I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score.
Well, on the issue of Ukraine, President Trump said Vladimir Putin had let him down. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, asked him questions about that and also about the sacking of the former ambassador to Washington, Lord Mandelson.
Prime Minister, President Trump has said he's ready to impose major sanctions on Russia if NATO countries stop purchasing Russian oil. He's got a point, hasn't he? Is that what you now believe is needed to bring Putin properly to the table? And what's your message to the President on US sanctions? And Mr. President, if I may, the King praised your personal commitment last night to finding solutions to the world's most intractable conflicts. You have invested much of your time and effort in Ukraine, but even as you seek to broker a deal, President Putin is escalating the war. He's firing drones into NATO airspace. You say he has let you down. Was it a mistake to invite him to Alaska? Do you regret it?
No.
And is it time to squeeze him, sir, and scare him and impose sanctions? And finally, if I may, the elephant in the room, Lord Mandelson, he is no longer the ambassador. Do you have some sympathy with him that he lost his job over historic links to Jeffrey Epstein? Thank you very much, sir.
I don't know him, actually. I had heard that, and I think maybe the Prime Minister would be better speaking of that. That was a choice that he made, and I don't know. What is your answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's very straightforward. Some information came to light last week which wasn't available when he was appointed, and I made a decision about it, and that's very clear. On the question of the pressure on Putin and on Russia, which is obviously really important. Look, I think it is a challenge to Europe. There are a number of European countries which are too reliant on energy from Russia. The UK actually obviously has almost got nothing at all, but we do need to bear down and work with our European counterparts here. There are one or two countries, I think, that do need to look again at the question of energy. There's no one silver bullet here. We do have to have a wider suite of sanctions, which we've put in place a number of times, working across Europe and with the United States. And of course, we must, and we are, making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position now, because one of my long concerns here has been that whilst we talk about a ceasefire, and we all want a ceasefire, and we talk about what might happen after a ceasefire, we mustn't forget that Ukraine needs our support now. And we've said we stand with Ukraine from the start to the finish, and that means we must continue to supply them with what they need in order to fight this war, which of course resulted from and is a result of Russian aggression. We have particularly done
the sort of leadership role in the coalition of the willing, so that if there is a ceasefire and if there is a deal, and I do hope there is, that is then lasting and not then broken, because given previous history, I don't trust Putin. Thank you.
Very simply, if the price of oil comes down, Putin's going to drop out. He's going to have no choice. He's going to drop out of that war. And when I found out that the European nations were buying oil from Russia, and as you know, I'm very close to India. I'm very close to the Prime Minister of India. I spoke to him the other day, wished him a happy birthday. We have a very good relationship. He put out a beautiful statement, too. We have, but I said, you know, I sanctioned them. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States. But I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia. If the oil price comes down, very simply, Russia will settle. And the oil price is way down. You know, we got it way down. We're drilling and we produce more oil than anybody else in the world. We're doing a lot. But I was disappointed to see that. And the Prime Minister was disappointed to see that. And it wasn't him. It was other countries. And you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't. That's not playing fair with the United States, and we can't have that.
And this is the scene at Stansted Airport as the UK prepares to say goodbye to President Trump and his entourage. And it was quite an entourage, Dominic, wasn't it? Not only key members of administration, but these tech billionaires. And, of course, a big part of this, from Starmer's point of view, would have been the deal on tech and AI and AI infrastructure.
And it is always a huge retinue, isn't it, that follows an American president around the world wherever he goes on these kinds of visits. This is Air Force One plane, but there's a whole fleet of other planes carrying, I think, around 500 people this time, but also the big transporter planes that will carry Marine 1 and 2 and other assets back to America. And amongst those 500 were some extremely wealthy people. Earlier on, we had Jensen Huang, who's the founder and chief exec of NVIDIA, that makes the chips that are going in to power the AI revolution. Now, his net worth is $150 billion. So that's sort of the GDP of Morocco, a bit less than the oil-producing country of Kuwait. $7 billion is the net worth of another man who was being interviewed next to us because he runs another cloud computing company. And the hope for Downing Street was that this president bringing these kinds of very powerful tech titans will bring a lot of wealth. So yes, investments, billions of dollars worth of investments, particularly in tech and in AI. And what the government is saying is that will be the beginning of a relationship, an alliance, a tech alliance that will be, you know, paying dividends for both sides. And this is a president who doesn't normally believe you can have win-win in a trading deal, but in this case, he does seem to think that. More disappointing, though, there wasn't, it seems, any progress in better tariffs, particularly for steel and aluminium. Yeah. You know, we were told that was the case before, but it certainly has, I think, would have caused a lot of disappointment, that. And I think it rather undermines this idea that this trade agreement would lead to greater things later on. If they didn't during this state visit, you know, when are we going to hear about the kind of progress that was the initial promise behind that deal?
Right, let's go through a few of the things that came up in that news conference. And interesting stuff on immigration, first of all. And Trump was asked what his advice was to Starmer on tackling illegal immigration. He said, it doesn't matter whether you have to bring in the military, you have to remove them. That would have, you know, slightly alarmed Keir Starmer.
Yes, and I think, you know, we heard a lot from President Trump about how his immigration policy of basically cutting off the southern border completely and deporting anybody who comes into America has led to 0 people crossing the southern border, and that's something he's very proud of. And he's trying to encourage Keir Starmer to do something similar there, as you say, possibly bringing in the military to deal with the small boats crisis. Now, I think that was potentially one fault line that could have led to, you know, more friction between these two leaders. It didn't, because they decided to sort of just move on from that. And I think that was the kind of tone, wasn't it? They agreed to disagree on those areas that they disagree on, find common ground on others. But there wasn't really any, you know, particular tension over those potential fault lines, you know, despite the best efforts of the journalists to try and, you know, exploit the differences between them.
Let's just have a listen to the exchange in that news conference on immigration.
We had millions of people flowing in, totally unchecked, totally unvetted from the Biden administration. 25 million, in my opinion, that would be about 25 million. They came from prisons, they came from mental institutions, they were gang members, they were drug dealers. They came from the Congo, they came from all parts of South America, they came from everywhere. Think of it, prisons from the Congo being released into the United States, prisons opened up in Venezuela and many other countries pouring into the United States.
Pressure up. I think it's important.
Didn't believe it. One of the reasons I decided to run. I decided to run because I don't want to be controversial, but you see what's happened and you see all the information that's come out. We won in 2020 big. And I said, let's run, we got to run, because I saw what was happening. And the worst thing that I saw was all of these people. You know, we've already solved inflation. We've solved prices. Oil is way down. Energy is way down in the United States. But what I saw happening with millions of people pouring into our country, I couldn't stand to watch it. And we've done a great job. Nobody, if you've seen the last, I appreciate your question, by the way. Nobody, absolutely zero, and I'm not even sure that's possible, but it's a very liberal group that come out with those statistics. The last 3 months, we had zero. From millions of people a year ago, we had zero people enter our country illegally. And we do have people coming in legally through a legal process and testing and lots of other things. I think it's very important, and we speak about it. And I think your situation is very similar. You know, you have people coming in, and I told the Prime Minister I would stop it, and it doesn't matter if you call out the military, it doesn't matter what means you use, but it's going to destroys countries from within. And we're actually now removing a lot of the people that came into our country. It's a very hard chore. We were given a very, very bad hand. Millions of people came in from prisons and mental institutions. We have to remove them. And we are removing them. We have no choice, and I feel very strongly about it.
We've struck a number of deals, both on cooperation with other countries, because this is a problem right across Europe, to tackle the problem of actually breaking up the gangs that are running this trade. We have had a record number of returns, over 35,000 now, since we came into office. That's the highest number for the best part of 10 years. We struck the returns arrangement with France, and notwithstanding the challenges to that scheme, which you've seen in the last few days, a flight went off at 6:15 this morning, successfully returning someone under that scheme. So that is an important step forward. Obviously, there's no silver bullet here. There's a range of things that need to be done. But given the challenges of returning people, it is important that we're able to prove it can be done. It was done. It was done early this morning. So I can confirm that that flight went successfully, and I'm pleased about that. Now we need to ramp that up at scale, which was always envisaged under the scheme, but it's very important that we have been able to prove that the proof of concept, if you like, that this can be done.
Let's pop back to Stansted, where the helicopters are approaching the Chinook, which seems to have arrived at all these places first, and the Chinook just hovering, waiting to land at Stansted, where, as we know, Air Force One is waiting. Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. And John, so on those issues, immigration, Epstein, free speech, will Starmer be thinking this evening that he's, well, got away with it?
I was going to say, actually, I mean, he's escaped, he's survived, hasn't he? Could have been a lot worse. The president was polite. He, of course, acknowledged the difference of opinion between the US and the UK on recognising Palestine. But the Prime Minister said they spent some time discussing that. But there was no row, there was no clash, really. And yes, they agreed to differ about that subject, but I think a sort of metaphorical shrug of the shoulders from the President, because the Prime Minister was quite firm when he was answering questions on that, dismissing claims from some American journalists that he was being soft on Hamas and was just encouraging them. There were all the subjects we expected to be covered were covered, really. There were attempts to persuade both the PM and the President to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Well, they got nowhere. The most bizarre moment, of course, was when the President and the PM were asked about Peter Mandelson. It was Beth Rigby's question. I don't know him. I mean, going back a few months, when they first met in the Oval Office, the President said, "God, you're a good-looking fellow," or words to that effect. So I don't think it's quite correct that the President doesn't know Peter Mandelson. He's obviously met him a few times in the short time that Lord Mandelson was the ambassador. But there was a question from Beth Rigby where she said, "Do you regret the Alaska summit?" "No," he said straight away. And so unapologetic about that. Obviously, there was quite a lot of questions about Putin. But I don't think we learned anything particularly new. But what we did learn was that the Prime Minister is not going to stood his ground. The Prime Minister, I thought, was rather less diffident than he had been when he went to the Oval Office earlier in the year, apart from that master stroke, if you like, of the letter being produced out of his inside pocket, the invitation. But the Prime Minister will regard the last couple of days as a success. The government will be delighted at the show put on by the Royals yesterday. And the PM will feel, I think, that today went well. He clearly, the business conference, the business meeting earlier at lunchtime, the PM talked at some length. I thought the President looked a little bit bored at one stage and seemed to be fiddling with his fingers. But the PM clearly is pleased about all these trade deals, although there are those who say they're not quite as good for the UK as the PM has claimed. For example, some of these tech deals. Sir Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister and former Meta boss, well, he's been quite rude about them and criticising them and saying they're not all they're cracked up to be. But the Prime Minister held his own, really, at that news conference just now. It could have been full of all sorts of perils. So Epstein didn't really come up. Mandelson was brushed aside. It was almost as if the President said, "We'll never forget old what's-his-name." But it was a claim, an extraordinary claim. He didn't know Peter Mandelson, but I think the Prime Minister will be quite glad that the President brushed that one aside, because he clearly didn't want to talk about that, or Angela Rayner, or any of the other embarrassing things the last few weeks. However, the Prime Minister was on less sure ground over his own deportation policy, because it's been a bad week for the PM and the new Home Secretary with the court case. Vexatious claims Shabana Mahmood talked about last night, claims of modern slavery being made at the last minute. That was bad, but the PM was able to say, look, a flight got off the ground today. OK, it's only one. He talked about ramping up those numbers. That's what the PM and the new Home Secretary have got to do now, get those numbers up. Otherwise, their critics will say, Conservatives will say, it's just a gimmick, it doesn't work. And that's an area, really, where the Prime Minister could have been on the defensive, but he wasn't really. His tone throughout the whole thing wasn't particularly defensive. He stood his ground, he defended his policies, and the body language was pretty good between them throughout the whole day. And the Prime Minister, I think, will be pleased that whilst they don't agree on everything, they got on pretty well, and clearly the two spouses got on pretty well as well.
Absolutely. John, just stay with us for a moment or two. I just want to talk to Dominic Waghorn, who's here. So this fairly restrained president in that news conference, do you think that is payback for yesterday, in a sense?
I think so. You know, unusually well-behaved Donald Trump. I think it's payback. I think it's also a sense that if he said the wrong thing and created the wrong headlines out of that press conference, then the headlines tomorrow would be all about that, falling out with the British Prime Minister, and not about all these amazing pictures he can now go back to America and enjoy. And I think for this president, he's a TV man, he knows the power of the image, and he wants the legacy of this state visit, this unprecedented second state visit, to be all about him being the centre of attention, having the full might of the British ceremonial military arrayed in front of him, and him being lavished this welcome. So I think, you know, he was aware of the pitfalls in this press conference, but he just wasn't, you know, there were attempts to kind of trip him up, and he wasn't even going to go there. And it's, as John was saying there, you know, what he said about Lord Mandelson was astonishing. And he has said it before about people who previous acquaintances who've turned out to be liabilities.
Denial.
Never heard of him, you know. And he actually,
yes.
At the time when he saw Lord Mandelson in the Oval Office, when he announced the trade deal back in May, he looked at him and he said, "God, you're a good-looking fellow, aren't you?" Well, he can't remember him now, it seems.
Yes. And one assumes that, I mean, Donald Trump, he said that, or Hillary Rosen, the Democratic strategist, said last night that it's very interesting because in Trump's first term, he made it clear that he wanted respect as president, and he didn't get it. People kept leaving his administration. He was mocked to a great extent in the media for things he said and things he did, she said. She said this time, it's a very different Trump. It's a very different administration. And she said the point about yesterday, and to an extent today, was that this was Donald Trump getting respect.
Yeah, and respect in the sort of the most respectable institution, the British monarchy, in the old country that America came from 250 years ago. And Donald Trump is somebody who throughout his life has felt a sense of resentment because he's felt like he's been treated as an outsider. You know, in New York society, he wasn't that clubbable. He's felt that he's been ostracised at many points in his life. And as you say, that was particularly problematic, and he was sensitive about it in his first term, where, you know, a lot of the world just didn't take it seriously. I was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Barack Obama kind of made a mockery of the whole idea of any Trump White House before he ran for office. I remember watching him at his table, seething with fury that Washington, the grace and the good of Washington, were laughing at him, mocking him. And there's some theory that, you know, that's actually what motivated him to run for the White House. So for him, this is kind of, you know, the vindication of all his resentments. Finally, he's now been welcomed by the British royal family twice. He's been given a welcome that no other elected leaders had before, and he can say that over and over again. No one else has had this kind of treatment from as venerable and exalted an institution as the British constitutional monarchy.
Yeah. And John, if you're still there, I just thought that one of the most awkward moments for Starmer in that news conference was on energy, when Donald Trump described wind as an expensive disaster. He talked about drill, baby, drill is my thing. And then he said, you've got the assets, you should use them. That's awkward for Keir Starmer.
Government is deeply at odds with their political opponents. It's something the Conservatives and other political parties have attacked Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, on, wasting resources in the North Sea, oil resources and so on. So, yes, that will have touched a raw nerve. I mean, that is, as well as being a big issue internationally, it is a very contentious issue here in the UK, net zero. It's something that both the Conservatives and Reform UK continue to attack the Prime Minister and Ed Miliband on. And of course, there were suggestions, not denied by Mr Miliband in an interview recently, that the Prime Minister wanted to move him from the energy brief, send him to housing, Angela Rayner's old job. So whether the PM, I mean, the PM always publicly says he backs Ed Miliband's hard-line net zero policy, but you just wonder if there are the odd doubts in the government there, because it is proving to be quite unpopular. Just going back to what Dominic was saying a moment ago, if I just pick up on that, contrast this with the last time he came on a state visit. You remember at the time, John Bercow refused to let him make a speech to both houses of Parliament, something that's happened to previous American presidents have done, European leaders, all sorts of people, Nelson Mandela, you name it, over the years. Bercow blocked that. Now, I know for a fact that that Lindsay Hoyle, the current Speaker, and the Lord Speaker, Lord McFall, have let it be known that if the government said that they wanted Donald Trump to come and address Parliament, they would not block it, they would let it happen. So clearly, it's all been very different. Yes, okay, he was kept away from London. He went to Windsor, tourist town, obviously, as well as the home of the royal family, and Chequers. I mean, Chequers is right out in the Chilterns. So, the demonstration here in Westminster yesterday, quite frankly, it was absolutely tiny compared with that massive march last Saturday organised by Tommy Robinson, Unite the Kingdom. So the protests have been less than perhaps we might have expected. The pomp obviously exceeded anything I think that many of us have seen before, that glittering banquet at Windsor, with VIPs including Rupert Murdoch, British politicians. I mean, for example, John Swinney, Scotland's First Minister, was there. His party in the past has had a very hostile attitude to Donald Trump. And the only really top-flight politician who boycotted that banquet was Sir Ed Davey, and he's explained why, policy on Gaza. Last time, Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, he boycotted it as well, as did people like Sir Vince Cable, who was the Lib Dem leader at the time. This time, Britain really has rolled out the red carpet for Donald Trump. They've thrown everything at this to make it a success, and they will regard it as having gone very well, particularly yesterday. Today, yes, there were those difficult questions on everything from immigration policy to net zero and energy and so on, and attempts to goad the Prime Minister and the President to talking about Epstein and Mandelson. But clearly, that very brusque "I don't know him" from the President was clearly saying, I don't want to talk about Epstein, I don't want to talk about Mandelson. Saying I don't know him probably helped the Prime Minister. Well, the Prime Minister would not say I don't know him, but clearly he was glad that that shut down any questions about Lord Mandelson. So and in some ways, I suppose the President helped him there by brushing that question aside. But yes, there are differences. Gaza, remember, that's going to flare up again in the next few days, because we're all expecting the government to make that announcement confirming the recognition of the Palestinian state. I wouldn't say quite, as soon as President Trump's plane takes off, but we are expecting in the next day or so that could reopen transatlantic wounds potentially, because the Americans don't like that. But the UK's got some cover, because there are other major nations doing the same thing. France, some other European nations, Australia, and so on. The Prime Minister is adamant that it's right, but of course there are those, as we heard from one question from an American journalist, who believe it's giving an advantage to Hamas. The Prime Minister, though, was pretty robust in defending his policy on that.
Yeah, OK, John, thank you very much. And you can see specks in the sky there, the two American helicopters, presidential helicopters, coming towards Stansted. And Dominic, I spoke to a diplomat last night, a Foreign Office diplomat, who said that it became a shorter visit almost by the week as the White House started shortening it. They were due, I think, to come on Wednesday morning, stay till Friday afternoon or Friday evening. And they said it was the White House that was shortening it. And I think, in the end, he came Tuesday night and left quite early today. Maybe because of Charlie Kirk's funeral, I suppose. But I think there were these suggestions that Donald Trump was unhappy about not addressing Parliament.
I'm not sure about that, but I think if it came from that side of the Atlantic, I think that would have been treated with relief by the Starmer government. I think the idea was that for this to happen fairly quickly. It was truncated in terms of the length of the trip, but also in the kind of geography. We didn't have Donald Trump going out onto the streets in a state coach. Because there was the risk of protest. He was kept at arm's length, or a lot more than arm's length from the public. And I think the idea was, to concentrate this and make it as an intense a kind of marinading in sort of pomp and circumstance and British military ceremonial power, soft power, if you like, make that effective, but then the longer it goes on, the more jeopardy. So, yeah, I think that they would have been happy with it. The idea it was only 2 or 3 days. It reduced the risk of anything going wrong.
The other thing he said was it's mainly about trying to nudge Trump on these crucial issues. Do you get a sense that Trump was nudged and has reacted or not?
Well, I think on difficult issues diplomatically, there are a couple of ways of going about them. One is the way that British prime ministers have dealt with China, for instance, on human rights, which is literally a sort of box-ticking exercise. You say, yes, you raised it, yes, they listened, but nothing's going to really change. With this kind of diplomacy, which is much more involved, the idea is that you engage with a leader. You may not see eye to eye on a whole range of issues with him. You put him in as good a mood as possible, using all the powers you have at your disposal, and then you talk to him and you express your point of view, and you make it very clear what your principles are, and you try and influence them. It seems over Gaza they just simply agreed to disagree, and this was a president on his best behaviour because he didn't take the bait over Palestine. He's not going to be happy when he flies back and knows that Britain has recognised Palestine either on Saturday or more likely at the beginning of UN week on Monday, but he knows it's going to happen and he's not going to respond to that. But he didn't sort of express any real problems with this in the press conference. There was no real friction there. I think on Ukraine, it doesn't look as though he's shifted much. And I think, as Jeremy Hunt was expressing, there's this theory that he is slowly coming around to the point of view that Vladimir Putin is not somebody who wants peace, and a lot more pressure is going to be required. But there's no real sense that this visit has pushed him any further along that trajectory, I don't think. What he said about Ukraine was that he's fed up with Putin. He feels Putin has let him down. He's really let him down. But there was no sense at all, and he was given a number of opportunities also not least by Beth Rigby, to say more about that, and he simply didn't say that. And he's now got this excuse. He's discovered that Europeans buy hydrocarbons from Russia, and he's saying he's not really going to do much more until that stops. The fact is that, Italy, France, other parts of Europe, Eastern European nations as well, are having a lot of trouble weaning themselves off Russian hydrocarbons, even 3.5 years into this war. So that's not going to happen quickly, which makes you think that actually he's going to kind of have a kind of reason not to put more pressure on Putin for some time to come.
Chinook is on the ground with some of the support staff, and the Marine One is heading in, and then Air Force One will be on the way. Just one other point, Dominic. Jan Egeland, I heard earlier today, former diplomat now at the Norwegian Refugee Council, talking about Gaza, was saying that all this pomp and pageantry is so loved by Trump that with all that, the UK and Starmer was in a really good position, he said, to get the ear of Trump in a way no one else does, and that they should use it to persuade him to do something about Gaza. Well, that doesn't appear to have, they may well have tried to persuade him, but it doesn't appear to have been the case.
Well, that seems to have been the case with actually that and Ukraine, because Mark Stone was talking to Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, and other Trump administration officials before the press conference began, and he said, did they talk about Gaza and Ukraine? And they said, no, not outside the one-to-one meeting. Now, it seems that the face-to-face meeting that officials weren't involved in was anything between 15 minutes and an hour. They could have talked about it then, but actually all the conversations outside of that were about the tech deal. So, that is not an opportunity it seems that the Prime Minister has taken, and certainly the way they both chose to talk about this in a kind of we agree to disagree sense, it doesn't look like he has persuaded Trump to shift on that. And I think for Trump, the bottom line is that Hamas has got to give up its hostages. He's been deeply moved by his meetings with those released hostages. He talked about someone who was held for 450 days. He asked whether there was any warmth, any humanity shown by Hamas, and he said he's never in any of his interviews with these hostages, these released hostages, been told that there was. And he has watched the videos, which the Israelis will play to anybody who wants to watch them, of what happened on that day, footage from the kibbutz. It's utterly horrific. footage of those atrocities. Clearly, he said, I'd much rather I hadn't seen it, but clearly very moved by it. So for him, that's the bottom line. He's less moved by the plight of the Palestinian civilians who are dying in their thousands in a way that Yvette Cooper says is appalling and reckless. And is leading to a lot more bloodshed, this offensive. He's less moved by that than by the plight of these hostages, and that's where his sympathies seem to still lie.
And we had Marco Rubio's visit to Israel, and it became pretty clear that the White House was still behind Netanyahu, supporting Netanyahu, or if not openly supporting Netanyahu, then at least not criticizing Netanyahu.
Yeah, and I think there are personal reasons why Trump is motivated in that direction. There are also political reasons. A lot of his base are evangelical Christians, and they are foursquare behind Israel and completely intolerant of any kind of position that doesn't support the Israeli government. But, it has to be said, outside of America, more and more governments are just fed up and losing patience with what Israel is doing, accusing them of genocide. And over this weekend, or at least by the beginning of the UN General Assembly week next week in New York, we're going to see this historic moment where Britain, France and other nations are going to stand up and say, we recognise a Palestinian state. Now, their critics will say they're doing that because they're not prepared to take firmer action to put real pressure on Israel to stop this allegedly genocidal campaign. But, for the governments and their diplomats, they say this is the moment when they need to support and recognise Palestine. And we heard the Prime Minister saying that was in the context of producing a more comprehensive peace agreement. But I think, as you said earlier, no real details as to how that's going to come about.
No, and of course, the White House have put forward some sort of peace plan, which involves Palestinians leaving, the place being rebuilt, and who knows what after that. That's got, obviously, short shrift. So it's difficult to know where things go after that.
I think it's fair to say there's no sort of realistic plan that the Americans have put in place or offered and proffered, as an alternative to the two-state solution. For all its faults, that is still the only sort of peace plan in town. As you say, we've heard sort of various real estate proposals from Donald Trump. We've seen weird videos he's actually endorsed of him lounging on sun loungers with Benjamin Netanyahu and suggesting that Gaza could be turned into some kind of seaside resort. Obviously deeply offensive to the people of Gaza and others who support them. But yeah, no real workable solution yet to how you end this terrible war. And if you talk to Israeli officials as well, they still do not have a plan for how the war comes to an end and what happens the day after. And for Netanyahu, the belief is still in this idea of total victory, which he is still pursuing through the ruins of Gaza City, and that's going to cost thousands, potentially, of more innocent civilian lives.
Yeah. I mean, this has really been 48 hours of Donald Trump getting on and off helicopters.
One helicopter, and getting into very big cars and driving very short distances.
But the beast came as well, the vast armoured car. Yeah, and that was presumably just to, well, in case the weather closed in or something like that. But basically, it just sort of ferried him around the Windsor Castle estate.
Yeah, exactly, and just around within the castle precinct, wasn't it? And I think the vehicles that were driving around today possibly were embassy vehicles. But if you think about the kind of assets and vehicles and aircraft that are taken around the world with an American president, I think it's a 14, 15-car motorcade. At least 2 of these helicopters, the Chinooks, I think, probably come from here. And most of the aircraft, the Beast 1 and Beast 2, are put into a transporter plane. It's not just to transport them, it's also to deliberately project power. Yeah. This is the most powerful man on the planet, and the Americans believe that around that office there should be this sense of invincibility, of extraordinary power. And so when he comes here, we didn't see the Osprey helicopters, but if you're on the ground beneath these choppers, you get a real sense of someone powerful being in the air and coming into land near you.
Donald Trump, always aware of where the cameras are. He will be on board Air Force One in a moment and on his way. And I'm just trying to see who that is, but it will be normally, I'm told, and I know this actually because Alistair Bruce has just, he says it's Lord Benyon. Right, well, that's interesting. So that's the Lord Chamberlain. See, Alistair Bruce tells us everything. And Alistair Bruce sent me a text saying it's going to be Lord Hood, Lord in Waiting. And he's updated.
He won't be happy with you that
he's
revealed on air he gave you the wrong name initially.
He said he's updated, and it is Lord Benyon is going to be the person who says goodbye to the President at the steps of Air Force One on behalf of the King and bid farewell on behalf of His Majesty.
Yeah, he's texted me as well to say, Alistair Bruce is present even when he's not around.
Yes.
Did an amazing job yesterday, all the way through the day, saying what exactly every piece of gold brocade on every uniform signified. But he's saying in protocol, lords in waiting are expected to do what departing heads of state might do after state visits.
Right. So there it is. Donald Trump back on Air Force One. Job done for both, the royal family, for Keir Starmer, and of course for the White House, who I'm sure, as Mark Stone was suggesting, are absolutely delighted with the way it's gone. And then Donald Trump now flies back to the raw politics in America, and the distraction is over for Keir Starmer, and he gets back to politics on this side of the Atlantic. I'm joined now by the executive editor of Politico, Anne McElvoy, and also by the political editor of The Observer, Rachel Sylvester. Good evening to you both. We're going to just keep an eye on these pictures as Donald Trump and the First Lady leave the UK. Anne, first of all, just your thoughts at the end of the trip, about the trip as a whole.
Well, it could certainly have gone a lot worse. I was just thinking that when those wheels go up that we're seeing there and Air Force One is off the ground, there will be, metaphorically or otherwise, I think, double gin and tonics around on Team Keir Starmer after a bruising few weeks. It's just reflecting also that pretty much everything has been going wrong that can go wrong inside and around Labour, in government and in the party. And the only thing that's gone relatively smoothly, with very few bumps and bruises, has been this high-stakes meeting with the ideological foe of everything that the centre-left really stands for. That's ironic, but that is a tribute to the way that Keir Starmer has been able to forge that relationship with Donald Trump. He didn't get everything he wanted at all out of this visit, but he certainly did not receive any damage from it, and he will be quite happy with that. And he got one or two things as well.
And Rachel, what are your reflections on this second state visit?
I think Anne's absolutely right. There'll be a huge sense of relief, actually, which is a strange thing to say at the end of all this pomp and ceremony and flummery, that actually relief is the ultimate mood. I was just watching Keir Starmer's face during that press conference where he was standing next to Donald Trump, and there was all the sort of backslapping and everything. But Keir Starmer's face, whenever Trump opened his mouth, there was this look of sort of terror. What's he going to say? The eyes slightly darting around the room, slightly nervous swallowing of the throat. And I just thought he had this sense of any moment, this very unpredictable man could go off-piste and say something that completely blew everything up. But actually, he was very well behaved, Donald Trump, in the press conference. They both sort of agreed to disagree, if you like. There were obviously areas where they hadn't been completely aligned, for example, on Palestinian statehood and the environment, wind farms, etc. But there was a sense of, look, this is a very strong partnership, special relationship. They found every kind of word they could use for that concept. So I think there will be a sense that Britain put on a good show and the president was impressed, and it went as well as it could.
And were you surprised at the news conference that he batted away issues like free speech? Not surprising, he didn't want to engage with the Epstein question from Beth Rigby, but he was very restrained.
Well, good on Beth for having a go, but there were two people, I think, who wanted to hear nothing at all about the words Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. And one is Keir Starmer, of course, having that bruising experience of having lost Peter Mandelson, the ambassador that he insisted on pushing into post in Washington over Peter Mandelson's, Lord Mandelson's association with Epstein. And also President Trump, who clearly has had a past association with Epstein, but who vehemently denies it and simply said, I don't know him or didn't know him. So in a sense, that was kind of out of the way. There wasn't much for follow-up that you could do there. I think when it comes to the other areas of difference, I was really, when you say surprised, I think it was very much at the positive end of expectation, let's put it that way, that things were just sort of brushed aside. It was, you can with Trump, you can just put a finger on a trigger and off you go. And you just, even in Scotland on the last visit, he did that a bit. Free speech is a good example, and sort of deriding the UK or giving us sort of lessons on how we ought to run Britain. Clearly the relationship now, the working relationship, is so functional that he doesn't do that. He's going to leave that to J.D. Vance and others who feel strongly about these things. Elon Musk, you clearly can't stop. No one can stop Elon Musk being Elon Musk. But President Trump did not lean into that. And I think there's just, at some sense, people often say, is he an intelligent man or not? And it's a quite complex question about Trump's intelligence. But sometimes he has a kind of gut feeling about when to lean into things and when to push and when to let them be. And on this occasion, he just decided, I think, to give the UK a bit of a pass and not go down that particularly ideological rabbit hole.
Rachel, we know the pressures that Keir Starmer is under. In fact, we've just seen him leave here. He's just left Chequers, presumably on the way back to Downing Street. Well, we know the pressures he's under. Do you think this has been good for Keir Starmer, this state visit?
Well, bear in mind that the British public really doesn't like Donald Trump. So the Prime Minister standing next to a very unpopular president won't have been a huge boost to his popularity. But I think there will be a sense that, Britain put on a good show. He didn't let the country down. It's something that Starmer is respected for, even amongst his critics on the Labour benches and elsewhere. He has been seen to have done a good job on the international stage. So I think it won't enhance his reputation, but it could have dramatically undermined it still further, and it didn't. So I think there'll be a sense in Downing Street that they'll take that as a win.
And he did have a dig on immigration about even if you have to use the military or bring the military in, you've got to remove them, he said. And then on energy also, he talked about an expensive disaster on wind and baby drill, I think he said, and you've got the assets, you should use them. That's quite awkward for Starmer.
I thought when Rachel was talking about you could watch Keir Starmer sort of waiting for the ball to land. Was it going to be in or out at the baseline when Donald Trump was thumping some of them across the net? They were both good examples exactly of that. You could see his watchfulness. Now on immigration, I think that was probably the bigger risk for him. I think on energy, a subject does divide people very strongly. Clearly there are two different views of all of this, and Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are definitely on the other side of this, and it goes back to fundamentally different assessments of the importance of addressing climate harm and climate change, the damage from that. But that wasn't really sort of lent into very much. It was into sort of agree to differ. I thought on the border there was definitely a sense that this could go the wrong way. And when Donald Trump started talking about using the military, Keir Starmer would have been quite tempted to say, well, I'm sorry, Mr. President, but the military are rather engaged at the moment helping Ukraine. Why don't you come along and give more of a hand? But no, he would certainly not be so provocative. I think what he was trying to do was just let Donald Trump say, this is the way I did it. That was the way the question was also phrased by a journalist from The Sun. This is how we've done it at the southern border. Of course, Keir Starmer doesn't want to get into the fact that the way removals are being handled in the US is very controversial, very brutal, and at times, completely is riding a coach and horses through any legal process or natural justice. He doesn't want to go down the lawyer route on this. So I think he just took the view in the moment, it will have been rehearsed about 10 times, if not more, that he would let President Trump sort of do his boast and then sort of signal, well, things are a bit different here and I'm trying to get a grip on it without leaning into those dividing lines about using the military or anything, which would clearly, obviously, be, not be something he wants to do. And also would have just been a headline for Trump in the end. It would not have benefited him.
Yes, and just finally, Rachel, slightly odd that we've had J.D. Vance, of course, lecturing the UK about the need for free speech. And now we've got this argument about free speech in the States, Trump's pursuit of the New York Times, the Jimmy Kimmel issue. What did you make of all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? The hypocrisy of the Trump administration coming and lecturing the UK about free speech when it's being undermined in the US. And I think it's really chilling, actually, using the sort of power of the government to clamp down on journalists in that way. And I suppose that's the one thing that really wasn't raised and didn't get confronted in the press conference today is you've got this increasingly authoritarian Trump administration. And at what point does the Starmer administration think, actually, that's going too far? We can't any longer align ourselves so closely with this kind of America. But for now, we're not there. But I do think that's a reminder of how high the stakes are and how much things are changing in the US.
OK, Rachel, thank you very much indeed. Anne as well, thank you. And we're just watching on the left of your screen there, Air Force One just taxiing, preparing to take off at the end of this state visit, historic state visit, as Donald Trump kept reminding us, and one that he has clearly enjoyed. Well, there have been a lot of themes to the state visit, and one of them, technology, more specifically, artificial intelligence. Earlier today here at Chequers, both the Prime Minister and Donald Trump unveiled hundreds of billions of dollars worth of investments in front of the world's biggest and richest tech leaders. I'm joined now by Dame Wendy Hall, Professor of Computer Science at the University of Southampton, who co-chaired the government's Artificial Intelligence Review. Good evening, and thank you very much for being with us. And as Air Force One prepares to take off, I just wonder, what did you make of that announcement of the huge investment in AI here in the UK?
Well, of course, it's a great deal for us. And sorry, it's a bit of an echo on here, I think. It's a great deal for us. And I'm cautious about some of the devil in the detail, but the investment in the UK, it's showing the world that we are actually a huge superpower in AI. And we always have been, and we're up there. We just don't have the scale and the money to do what the US and China can do. My worry is about sort of selling ourselves to the US tech bros and whether that will constrain us in the way we really want to do it, and what the regularity campaign, AI regulation and data regulation, what the criteria are going to be for that this runs under.
Yes, so there we are. Donald Trump and the First Lady are in the air and heading back to Washington after that state visit. I'm talking to Dame Wendy Hall about what the government hope will be a dominant theme of the visit, tech and AI investment. Dame Wendy, some are describing it as, rather than investment, something of an invasion. Nick Clegg said he worries we're in danger of becoming a vassal state technologically. Do you think that is a worry?
It does worry me in the sense that I would like to think that we're going to influence the US in terms of how we make the world safer in the era of AI. Because Donald Trump is very set against regulation. We want to bring in sensible regulation. We have our Safety Institute, and we support what the UN's doing in terms of global dialogue. And I hope we can influence the US in that direction so that we can ensure that AI is developed in a responsible and safe way by the big companies that are on US soil.
But do you think that the UK is, in a sense, giving up its tech sovereignty? Or do you think there could be, as Keir Starmer says and as Donald Trump says, a huge sort of AI growth boost sometime in the future?
There is a danger, and the devil is always in the detail, and it depends on the balance of power. You know, these are on our soil, US data on UK soil. I mean, what does that mean? But there will be a boost for economic growth just in terms of building these data centers, and the developments around the data centers in energy I find so exciting as well. The emphasis on small modular reactors, the small nuclear reactors, to almost make the data centers into heat generators, as well as to support the local region. I think this is fascinating. The potential for economic growth is huge, but we have got to stay, in some sense, in control of what happens on our island, and not be seen to be just the vassal state that Nick Clegg's talking about.
And there's a lot of talk about the new jobs that will come from the investment. But, I mean, are these jobs that will eventually be taken over by AI?
No, I don't think so. I think the rhetoric about everybody losing their jobs is not to worry about at the moment. There will be winners and losers, but history tells us that these sorts of technological innovations will lead to new jobs. And they talked a lot about skills today, which was very good to hear. People developing their careers with a view to what jobs are going to be there in 5-10 years' time. As all this comes online, we start to use AI more in the mainstream, there'll be lots of new jobs created, and we need to encourage our schools, schools and universities, to train the people that are going to work in this industry.
Dame Wendy, are we hoping for too much from AI? I mean, could the bubble burst before it's even started?
Well, there is a danger there is an economic crash coming. The companies are overvalued. And I think there's something in here about them heading that off in some way, by showing value in other ways, because they're not making money out of it at the moment. There's all sorts of reckoning to come. But AI is with us now and will be, just like the internet, just like electricity, just like all the other major technological innovations. And we're going to get huge benefits from it. And there's a lot in here about talking about joint research in areas like cancer and biomedicine, where we will be able to develop things we couldn't possibly have developed without AI, that will help a lot of people in the world. And I mean, Demis Hassibas was sitting there, one of our great leaders of AI, who's absolutely convinced that the AI and science is we're going to have huge breakthroughs in science because of AI.
Right, and just finally, so this huge investment is happening from America, but your view is we shouldn't be frightened about AI and what's going to happen.
No, I've always said that, Mark. You know that. We'll harness it, and we need to keep it tamed, under our control, and use its power to do good things for the world.
Okay, Dame Wendy Hall, thank you very much indeed for being with us. And there you can see Donald Trump and the First Lady. These are pictures from a few moments ago. They're now in the air, and the second state visit of the American president is done and dusted. And as we've been saying, Donald Trump has clearly enjoyed himself, and Keir Starmer has, well, he got away with it, I suppose we could say, at the news conference, and he and his staff will be breathing a huge sigh of relief at the end of this visit this evening. So it's 6 o'clock. You're watching the News Hour live this evening from Chequers, the Prime Minister's country estate, where Donald Trump's historic second state visit has now drawn to a close. Tonight, Sir Keir Starmer will be, as I've just said, breathing a huge sigh of relief. The potentially problematic news conference between the two leaders ended without real controversy with the American president on unusually good behavior. The only publicized disagreement was on the issue of Gaza. On other issues like free speech and Jeffrey Epstein, Mr. Trump just batted the questions away. The president has now departed for Washington, and Air Force One is in the air. It's a journey of about 7 or 8 hours, and they will be back in Washington and then back to the White House after what has been a relatively short state visit, but nevertheless, both sides will be considering it a success. No real progress on the issues that Keir Starmer hoped to make progress on, which would have been Gaza and certainly Ukraine. Donald Trump did suggest that, or hint that now it looks like there are going to have to be more pressures put on Putin. He said Putin has let us down and let him down personally, he said, and then he suggested that it would be up to the Europeans to stop buying so much Russian oil.